Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and Captain Marvel issue number 31. You know, I found myself walking into a familiar territory that, if it didn't feel familiar, I would have just skipped ahead. Something told me don't, and I'm glad that I listened to that inner voice. Maybe it's my inner child. Maybe it's my inner Kelly Thompson. I don't know. But let's get on to that. Hey, spoiler, Kelly Thompson wrote this comic book. Takeshi Miyazawa did the art. Disappointed that Takeshi's going to be leaving the next issue because I didn't read the previous story arc. I'm going to give that its own due in a moment. But I don't remember if this is the first time I'm seeing Takeshi doing this Captain Marvel book, but the person taking over next week, next month, whatever, next story arc, they got some big shoes to fill because this was a beautifully rendered comic book, man. I really enjoyed the art in this. You know what I'm saying? It's not one of those books where the art takes center stage. This was a very heavily story-driven comic book, you know what I'm saying? But when the action came up, Takeshi did not disappoint. You know what I'm saying? But when it was but with the earlier part where it was story-driven, Takeshi, I don't know if Takeshi's a male or female, so I'm just going to keep on saying Takeshi anyway. T had a great way of just not letting the art dominate the story, you know? So it's really good. I like the way that happened. Ian Herring doing the colors and VC's Clayton Cowles on letters and production. Marco Chicheco doing the cover art with Matthew Wilson, and In Hyuk Lee becoming the new art germ with these gorgeous variant covers. All right. So I'm reading the beginning of this comic book, and instinctively, like, I've read so many comic books. I've read a lot, but the point is, I read so many comic books that I know when something isn't crucial to the storyline. You know what I'm saying? It's instinctive at this point. And I thought, I could just skip this and I can move ahead. In this particular case, the mistake in my mind that I didn't actually go through with was the idea that I was thinking about just skipping ahead, because in this particular issue, we see Carol on a plane with Rhodey. I mentioned that I didn't read the previous story arc. I was sick. All right, forgive me. When I'd last read, there was a situation with Ove. What do you call it? Carol broke up with Rhodey, and it was like, oh wow, that's fuss, bro. That's fuss, And you knew they were eventually going to get back together again because you could see the setup there. And it's important to do. Readers don't want things just... Here's an example of the Tim Drake thing. Readers don't want to be surprised. Not really, right? They want to figure things out. This is one of the reasons why there's not too many mystery stories out there, because a lot of people don't know how to write a good mystery story. You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to be taken aback, and, say, like, jump scares work, but not surprise birthday parties and things like that. We want to be able to see it coming. We want there to be some kind of a hint, so that we can always sit there and say, I've been reading for years, or even, earlier in the story arc, and aha! Like, they want to be able to, even if they don't figure it out, they want there to be that conversation, right? Where you say, oh, I could have figured it out, but I didn't see it coming. Oh, and you could be okay or disappointed with what's about to come next, but we want to be able to see it coming, right? We want to be able to say, I knew they were going to get back, and then read how they get back. And even if it's I didn't expect it to happen this issue, but I knew it was going to happen, you're still walking away with, like, tears of joy streaming out of your freaking eyes. Or just, a satisfied chuckle that, I knew it was going to happen. It doesn't matter, high horse, low horse, whatever, all right? People want to be able to see it coming. You know what I'm saying? So, what do you call it? Like, that's the whole Chekhov's gun thing, right? Like, it's just... We want to know. We want to have an idea. We want it to at least be fairly hinted at, so we had a chance to figure it out even if we didn't. So I knew they were going to get back, but they got back much earlier than I expected them to. I missed like one lousy story arc, and all of a sudden, boom, they're back. Okay, cool. But I would have thought that this was a freaking Skrull agent if there wasn't one thing in this book, and that's called a foreword. I call it a preamble, sometimes. That's just in my own head. But like the forward of the comic book, expertly done. I tell you all the time, the Jim Byrne rule, which, mind you, I made up, but I'm calling it the Jim Byrne rule. Every comic book is your first comic book. Or every comic book that you make is someone's first comic book, right? I don't care if it's the first time they're ever reading a comic book, period, or like, who knows? Captain Marvel issue number 31 might be someone's first comic book ever. Maybe it's their first comic book in a long time. Maybe it's their first comic book in the story because people like me are saying it's a great series, go read it, right? And they say, let me just grab issue 31. If this doesn't work for me, then I don't know what to say. You know what I'm saying? So every comic book you make is someone's first comic book. If you don't write comic books in that regard, you've missed the plot entirely. I don't care if you're in the middle of a story arc. You have to be able to figure that out. And the forward is the absolute hands down best way to do that. And boom, I read the forward. I read forwards. Even when I read the previous issue, even when I've been reading every issue, I read the forward and boom, there you go. That's why it's so crucial. I missed a story arc, but I didn't miss anything. I'm good to read this comic book. I don't have to say, wait, I got to read the previous 6 issues to catch up, or however many I missed. Anyway, so they're together and I'm like, cool, whatever. And they're on a plane and I'm reading this, and here's the mistake I almost made. I thought about reading ahead. I thought about skipping ahead because I've read enough comic books that I see this, I'm reading this, I understand what's going on. This is like, there's this much of a story in the comic book and this much of a comic book. So what's this part here? Well, that's the airplane scene. Everything that's on the plane is essentially just that part. So it's the part that you could skip ahead, theoretically, and not really miss anything, right? Nothing crucial happens in this, except that it is a Kelly Thompson book, and that's the reason why I didn't skip ahead, because I'm like, somebody on this plane, we're going to wind up finding out in 6 to 8 issues or so, is actually the main bad guy or the brand new hero, or the new star of the comic book, which I think we're seeing Star again. Star is a great character. Star is a great character. A reporter who just shows up out of nowhere and it's like, oh, who's this blondie chick? You know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden it turns out, oh my gosh, that was actually important. I'm telling you, man, you can't skip stuff. You can't skip stuff in a Thompson book. So anyway, I'm sitting here reading this and I'm like, don't skip ahead because you never know if something might be important. Whether something was important or not, I am so glad and so delighted I did not skip ahead, because the best part of the comic book was the beginning. That's not to dump on what happened later on, but honestly, action could happen, action could not happen. And you want to know what happened in the rest of the comic book, go read the freaking comic book. But I'm going to tell you what happened in the unimportant part here, because it says a lot about who's on this comic book. All right? I already talked about Takeshi Miyazawa on this, and how they're able to make the book like the art doesn't get in the way when it's story-driven part, but when it's time for the art to start, taking a step up, and instead of me saying, I fired my photon blast, Captain Marvel fired her photon blast, and they cut through the bro, it's a comic book. I want to see it. I don't want to read it. I want to see that. I got plenty of novels sitting behind me and on 2 different bookshelves in my home. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to read that in a comic book. I got a comic book for that part. So anyway, so great art in there. But here's Kelly, who's going to step up, and her strength. It's not to take away from anything else. Don't get that wrong. Her strength, God damn it, is in the dialogue. And this person who claims to be a freaking reclusive Sasquatch, that's a lie. I'm going to call that out right now. That's a lie. I'm a recluse, all right? I went out twice in the past 2 months. I went outside, besides taking my kids down to the park, okay, which is not very far away. You know what I'm saying? Make some sandwiches, not sandwiches, sandwiches, because they are tasty AF. Make some sandwiches, go down to the park and hang out with the kids, run around and play, toss the football, play some baseball, and they were supposed to play some soccer, but I'm getting old and I'm tired and I'm sick and just, I ain't running around like all that, man. Anyway, tossing stuff is no problem. Running and chasing things ain't gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? Ain't gonna happen. Anyway, the point is, like, I went out twice. And both times were to the hospital. You know what I'm saying? So, like, it is what it is, bro. On the way back the second time, because that was just a follow-up. You know what I'm saying? I stopped off at a Walmart and a Toys R Us. You know what I'm saying? Because Why wouldn't you stop off at a Walmart and a Toys R Us? I'm saying. So I'm the recluse. Kelly talking about she stays indoors, doesn't like to go outside and stuff like that. Kiss my ass with your lies. Nobody can sit indoors all the time like that and know people as well as she does, writing the way that she does. The scene on the plane, bro, I used to read some Millie the Model comic books back in the day, all right? I don't have any of them anymore because 2011, that was my 2020. All right, 2011 was my 2020. But in this particular case, I still have some, it's Patsy books. You know what I'm saying? The pre-Hellcat Patsy books. I still have a couple of those, including the first comic book appearance of Stan Lee. Hey, guess what? All those comic books were written by Stan Lee. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people say, Stan Lee wasn't really a writer. He didn't do that. Stop talking. You stop talking. Okay? Those of us who've actually read a plethora of comic books know that's a goddamn lie. Books that Ditko and freaking, I think Bernie Wrightstein was drawing those comic books. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's ever said Bernie Wrightstein is a great, or Bernie Wrightstein, no wait, actually he's whoever the hell was doing it. Look, my point is, all right, Kirby and Ditko had nothing to do with those It's Patsy books. You know what I'm saying? So just stop, all right? Freaking Stan Lee knew how the hell to write. He knew how to write some great dialogue. He knew how to write witty banter. He knew how to write wit. He knew how to write banter. He knew how to combine the two. All right? This dude was just all over really great writing. There was an edict back in the day. No one, and The Rock says no one, was allowed to write The Silver Surfer except Stan Lee. Mother Fathead knew how to write. And you can't tell me there's a better written character out there back in the day than freaking Silver Surfer. So I shut it. The point is, here comes Kelly, who knows how to write all these different characters interacting with each other on this plane scene. And this had nothing to do with anything, but I'm sitting here reading this, and I'm just like, this is the strength. This is the power. This is where this is all coming from. This is where the comic book's true strength comes from. Bro, I could read Captain Marvel doing photon blasts all over the place. I could read Rhodey, stuff that happens to Rhodey that wouldn't happen in his own comic book, but this isn't his own comic book, so this is the place for it to happen. You know what I'm saying? Where he can't use his armor for a couple of minutes. Makes perfect sense to me. It makes perfect sense to me, right? But the conversation, the back and forth, people recognizing some people, the benefits of wearing a helmet or a big, metal mask, whatever, all right? They all come into play here. The different personality types, right? We get a L'Oreal, that's a makeup company. Her sister, all right, actually, I got it here someplace. It's somewhere, okay? Anyway, her, all right? L'Oreal, right? Isn't it L'Oreal? God damn it. Yeah, it's L'Oreal. It's L'Oreal. Holy crap, that's a freaking makeup company. I never made that connection before. Anyway, the point is, I think that my grandmother actually drove a forklift. My grandmother was a badass, man. God rest her soul. But 2 years and 1 month ago. But what do you call it? She used to drive a forklift for all those makeup companies. You know what I'm saying? Badass woman. Anyway, what happens here? All these different people talking and the interactions. The stewardess was the best. The stewardess was the absolute best, right? My sister-in-law used to be a stewardess. Freaking, I love that flight attendant. Anyway, I love it. Absolutely love it. Listen, I bring up the It's Patsy books, right? The Patsy and Hetty books and the freaking the Millie the Model books and all those romance books, right? The true romance, right? All those books, because I know not a lot of people have read those books, right? I'm fully aware. But if you ever chose to, you know what's going to happen? You're going to find... I don't know, y'all just heard that horn, but it was perfectly placed. You know what's going to happen? Gotta go. What's going to happen is you're going to read a comic book that doesn't have laser beams and cowboy pistols flying around and space invaders and stuff like that, right? You're going to have a book where the action is minimal. At best, there might be a chase scene, but there'll be no guns, right? There'll be none of that. So you have to be a good writer. You have to be a damn good writer to write a story like that and to keep that attention and for that book to go well past 100 issues. You got to be on point. You got to be on fleek. Did anybody say that anymore? That's why cool is the coolest cool word ever, because I could just use it 3 times in a sentence, and it's been around since God knows how long. Longer than any of us have been alive, that word has been alive, right? And it's always been perfect. There's no like, oh, that word was so like last year. It's cool, all right? All the kids say cool. Anyway, you're going to find some really great writing in those books. I could read Kelly writing these books. I would still want the art to be good. Doesn't have to be great. There's no need for it to be great. Just good. Decent. All right? I could read Kelly doing a romance book. She used to do Sabrina. She'd probably go back and read her Sabrina books, but there's magic in there. It's like, whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's not. I heard it's good. I can't read everything. But if she were to write like an Archie book, Betty and Veronica and all those, you know what I'm saying? I've never really read those books. I read Archie versus Predator and Archie versus the Punisher the first time, right? Didn't read any of the other books. I just read the ones that are like, oh, that's interesting. But if I found out that Kelly was doing something like that, I would read it. I would read it because I bet you there'd be some of the best books they've ever read. Because when you have the ability to write stories that really pull you in, that keep you engaged, and there's no laser beams flying and stuff like that, right? You can't tell me that is not a top-notch skill. You also can't tell me that you're a recluse. I don't want to hear, I watch a lot of TV. Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit. Anyway, look, this was just a really, really good story. All right. Here, the book was very fun. I enjoyed reading this book. There were some really good parts in here, right? If I had to make a criticism, I didn't fit. There were 3 different characters in here. There's the very stiff L'Oreal. There's Rhodey, who he's not the main character. He shouldn't be the main character. He shouldn't even be the second main character, right? But then there's the main character, and that's Carol. Those were the 3 big voices in this book, right? If you want to include the sludge, then fine, you can say the sludge. But I mean, that was a very unique voice. I'd like for the 3 voices to have sounded more different than each other, right? I'd like to have seen Carol use more contractions and for L'Oreal to go out of her, for Kelly to go out of her way to make sure that L'Oreal is saying words that need to show that she doesn't use contractions, right? I like the idea when Rhodey has his helmet on, you see the word bubbles actually have it's like he's inside of this hollow helmet or over the speaker talking. So I really like that, right? But just I want to see the thing where if you erased all the pictures, I could still look at the word bubbles and know exactly who's talking all the time, and not because you're mentioning someone's name over and over again. I don't want to read a damn novel. I hate when I read a novel and they're constantly, with like, here's the brackets, the quotation mark, people are talking, and it's like, oh, hey, Bob, I'm doing such and such and such. Well, hey, Jan, yeah, I know you're doing this, but okay, but Bob, I do. He said, she said, he said, she said. I want the voice. I need the voice to be so unique, right? That I don't need you to remind me who's talking. I know simply from the way that I'm reading. That's what I want to see, right? Shit, if she could do that, you know what I'm saying? Where's Kelly on Substack? Everybody else is going on Substack. Where's Kelly on Substack? You know what I'm saying? That's what I want to see. You know, I want to see those. I want to see her doing some romance books. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to read. You know. Anyway, so when I read a book like this, and the part that has no real action, that the whole teleportation thing and back and forth stuff is really just to add flavor. It's not the focus. I'm in love. I'm in love. I could sit here. I could read this. I could read a whole book like this. I could read a double-sized comic book. I could read a freaking entire arc in a trade paperback. I could sit in one reading and just read a whole story like that, because that's where you're showing some serious talent. And I probably already beat this to death, and I hate beating things to death. But yeah, reading something like that beginning part that essentially has nothing to do with nothing else, I loved that. I sat there and I'm like, this is the book for me. There could be a whole bunch of really important things that happen later in this book. That's fine. I've already given this a good grade, because it's just fantastic to be able to read something like that. Anyway, 23 minutes just praising a book for the most part. Yeah, I think that's good enough. Guys, make sure you're checking this book out. For the love of God, come on. And for the love of God, like the video. And for the love of God, watch an ad. And I will talk to you guys later. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.